Phoenix Talkback, the world's first Jewish and Chicano radio show! Well, the big news this week was a federal district judge has enjoined the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office from racial profiling. Here with an editorial in a section we call Arpaio Watch, also found on Facebook, is Bobby Hernandez.
I'm an elected constitutional sheriff. I'm the poster boy for racial profiling. The type of clothes they're wearing, their speech. We raid businesses. We arrest Latino people. They go directly to jail. That's what this is all about. I do it all the time. Arrest Latino people, send them back to their country. How do you know they don't like me? And that's the way it is. What difference does it make? What difference does it make?
A United States District Court judge told the world what we Chicanos already knew. Joe Arpaio and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office racially profiles Hispanics, whether they are legal or not. But as usual, Joe's lapdogs on the right are yelling that we should just let him do his job by enforcing immigration law and arresting those dirty Mexicans. Hey, but sorry to rain on your parade, folks. Judge Snow ruled that old Joe's policy of enforcing immigration law was unconstitutional. That means that this liberal activist judge just put the kibosh on harassing people like me, brown people. Oh, and not to be outdone, Joe's idiot lawyer, Larry Klayman, is trying to end the recall by acting like a big loser and going to court and whining that the recall is unfair. Because according to his reading of Article 8 of the Arizona Constitution, the 6-month no recall provision applies because Joe was just elected to a new term. Well, I guess Mr. Klayman needs to go back to law school and retake basic Arizona law, which covers the Arizona State Constitution. Read the full article, which states that the 6-month rule does not apply to subsequent terms. And according to my count, this is term number 5 for Sheriff Joe. The recall was just given a huge gift by the U.S. District Court here in Phoenix. Now let's see if they capitalize on it or if the recall is dead on arrival. Please visit us at the Arpaio Watch Facebook page for Phoenix Talkback. I am Bobby Hernandez.
I'm an elected constitutional sheriff. I'm the poster boy for racial profiling. The type of clothes they're wearing, their speech. We raid businesses. We arrest Latino people. They go directly to jail. That's what this is all about. I do it all the time. Arrest Latino people, send them back to their country. How do you know they don't like me? And that's the way it is. What difference does it make? What difference does it make?
Bobby Hernandez with an editorial about Joe Arpaio. Today is a special edition of Phoenix Talkback. We will be discussing primarily 3 issues: Joe Arpaio and the ruling, immigration reform, and the DREAM Act. And here in the studio with me is my co-host, Cesar Valdez, a dreamer. He's been here before. Welcome back to the show, Cesar.
Thank you for having me again, Lou. Always a pleasure.
I'm glad you're here. And for the benefit of our listeners, you're a dreamer, is that right?
Yes.
For the benefit of our listeners, please, can you define the DREAM Act?
Yes, well, the DREAM Act is a piece of legislation that would benefit undocumented immigrant youth. In a nutshell, it just would put them on a pathway to citizenship if they meet certain requirements and follow certain provisions.
And is this a part of the Gang of Eights plan?
It is, yes, it is included under the current proposal.
Oh, that's good. But I really fear that when the House of Representatives submits their own legislation, that it may not include the DREAM Act.
I think for the longest time, both the House and Senate can agree that a good starting point has always been the DREAM Act. It would be a first step in the right direction.
Yeah, the House would be foolish not to include the DREAM Act. And Cesar, what do you think of this ruling against the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office?
I'm just curious to see how it would be implemented and what would result of it, and see how Arpaio's actions, if they would change at all, if his procedures would be affected at all, if he's just going to find a different way to
Right. I fear he's going to skate. He's going to come up with some other kind of exclusion in order to continue doing what they're doing. And you know, folks, the fish stinks from the head down. And not only does Joe Arpaio need to resign, but the whole structure of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and for that matter, the whole structure of a lot of the Republican type of legislators here in Arizona need a realignment. Do you agree? I think so. You bet. Well, let me tell you who we've got in the studio here with us today. It's a great panel. We've got Terry Greene Sterling. Hello, Terry.
Hi, how are you? Nice to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And we've got Carmen Cornejo.
Hello, Lou. How have you been?
I've been fine. Thanks for asking. We've got James Garcia.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So, folks, I want you to stay tuned because we're going to be returning with our panel right here on Phoenix Talkback. Is this your car? Or is this your car? The ASE certified mechanics at A&B Automotive have the expertise to make your car sound like this. You can rely on A&B Automotive to keep you safe on the road. Go see them at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, 602-906-9579. Because you don't want your car to sound like this. You want it to sound like this. A&B Automotive, 602-906-9579. Tell them Phoenix Talkback sent you. Do you have a business or a message you would like to promote? Phoenix Talkback would like to help you. Phoenix Talkback is now available to you to help you tell the world whatever they need to know. When you advertise on Phoenix Talkback, not only will your message be heard on the radio, it will also be heard on the internet for as long as there is an internet, and we think that will be for a very long time. Our creative sound engineers will craft a custom-made, memorable image people will hear about your product or your message. Try us! Try Phoenix Talkback for your advertising needs. Right now, we're new and we're pretty inexpensive. So this is a golden opportunity for you to reach out to the growing number of listeners who are tuning into Phoenix Talkback. Call us at 602-910-4568. That's 602-910-4568 to get with our program and reach all the listeners. They're waiting for you. Is this your car? Or is this your car? The ASE certified mechanics at A&B Automotive have the expertise to make your car sound like this. You can rely on A&B Automotive to keep you safe on the road. Go see them at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, 602-906-9579. Because you don't want your car to sound like this. You want it to sound like this. A&B Automotive, 602-906-9579. Tell them Phoenix Talkback sent you. Do you have a business or a message you would like to promote? Phoenix Talkback would like to help you. Phoenix Talkback is now available to you to help you tell the world whatever they need to know. When you advertise on Phoenix Talkback, not only will your message be heard on the radio, it will also be heard on the internet for as long as there is an internet, and we think that will be for a very long time. Our creative sound engineers will craft a custom-made, memorable image people will hear about your product or your message. Try us! Try Phoenix Talkback for your advertising needs. Right now, we're new and we're pretty inexpensive. So this is a golden opportunity for you to reach out to the growing number of listeners who are tuning into Phoenix Talkback. Call us at 602-910-4568. That's 602-910-4568 to get with our program and reach all the listeners. They're waiting for you. A&B Automotive is your local auto care center, trusted with your vehicle since 1995. They are your local service center for light trucks, domestic, and foreign vehicles. Their experience ensures that your vehicle is well maintained all year round. It's the small repairs that prevent costly breakdowns, and you can trust A&B Automotive ASE certified expertise in everything from oil changes, tune-ups and brakes, to drivetrain and engine repairs. It's what they do to make your vehicle reliable when you need it most. Go see A&B Automotive at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. That's A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix. 602-906-9579. Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback, the world's first Jewish-Chicano radio show. And in the studio with me again is my co-host, Cesar Valdez.
Hey, Lou.
And we've got a great panel here. Let me introduce them, and they'll tell you about themselves. We've got Terry Greene Sterling.
Hi, my name is Terry Greene Sterling. I'm the writer-in-residence at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at ASU, and I am a journalist. I write for The Daily Beast and many other publications, and I'm the author of the book Illegal: Life and Death in Arizona's Immigration War Zone.
We also have Carmen Cornejo. Hello, Carmen.
Hi, Lou, and everybody there. I am a DREAM advocate. I've been advocating for the DREAM Act since 2006, and he has an amazing adventure where we get to meet a lot of the talented dreamers. And also, I have become like the expert in the intersection of immigration and education in Arizona and the country.
We also have James Garcia.
I love that. James Garcia. It's almost like a boxing match. This is James Garcia. I am a journalist and playwright and communications consultant primarily here. And I work for a number of people doing communications work. A lot of it is connected to social justice issues, as is my playwriting as well.
Let's give them a hand for being here. Yay! In the studio. So I'll start it off. The biggest news, last Friday's ruling by Judge Murray Snow enjoining the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office from racial profiling. Who's got something to say about Judge Snow's ruling?
Where to begin? Well, let's just say that when I heard the news, I was elated and a little bit shocked. It's taken about 8 months for the judge to come out with their ruling. And by the way, just so if you don't know the background, this is a lawsuit that was brought specifically by the American Civil Liberties Union of Arizona and their national office as well. And they have an office here that's very effective and has been growing over the last few years. And so they pressed this. And the case basically said that the sheriff's department and sheriff's deputies would identify people for targeting based on their race, based on the fact that they were Latino. And there were 2 or 3 major cases that were involved. Specific plaintiffs that were involved in the case. I don't know all of the particulars, but essentially the sheriff's department was identifying people as Latino, saying, we're going to target you, pulling them over, holding them at the side of the road for a much longer period of time than they would other people. They even, in one of the plaintiffs, in fact, was in a car with a white driver. The white driver was not interrogated. The Latino driver was interrogated extensively. So it was that kind of practice, which is something that, frankly, Arpaio has been engaged in for years at a lot of different levels. And as we also know, the federal government is out there with its own lawsuit, the Justice Department lawsuit, that at some point has to be decided as well. So I was elated because, one, it validates what essentially the Latino community has been saying for years about this sheriff. And two, it may foreshadow some sort of a ruling, favorable ruling in the Justice Department. And if the Justice Department ruling is anywhere near as favorable as this, we could end up with a sheriff's department that is, in essence, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, it would be taken over by the federal government, and the federal government would manage it as it did the police department in New Orleans a number of years ago.
Right. And I think what's really important about this case, I mean, it's so important on so many different levels, but the sheriff has said he only used race as one factor in stopping people during traffic stops. And a lot of the case centers on traffic stops and raids. And the judge pointed out, well, you know, that doesn't seem to be true because you have detained more Latinos than people of other ethnicities. And I mean, you've arrested them, more of them, and you've detained them longer. So basically, I've been a journalist in Arizona for 30 years, and this is the first real slapdown that we've seen of the sheriff in 20 years. It's a very significant ruling, and it discloses, according to the judge, a systemic abuse of Latinos, constitutional abuse, in the jails, but also on the streets of Phoenix. And so the sheriff will, of course, appeal because he contends he's done nothing wrong. And in the meantime, I don't know how long this is going to go. I don't know how long the appellate process will take. But in the meantime, there's a lot of talk about this judge appointing a monitor to oversee the department. We don't know if that's going to happen yet, but if that happens, the sheriff isn't going to like it.
I think the last time there was a monitor, the 287G was taken away?
Yeah.
Well, the big monitor in a big federal class action lawsuit was Arnold versus Sarn, which was a mental health lawsuit, and it was giant like this one. And basically what it means is that the monitor reports back to the judge and says, the sheriff is complying with your orders or the sheriff isn't. So basically, the judge, if we do get a monitor, the judge will have eyes and ears in the sheriff's department.
But those monitors still exist. In that
the
case.
monitors still exist,
Yeah.
and that's like a 20-year-old case. So, I mean, this is a really serious deal if they put a monitor in there.
Well, I think also beyond that, I think the one thing that encourages me is that the judge's order is in place now, and Arpaio either has to abide by it or find a court remedy that essentially says we can temporarily not have to listen to the judge until it goes through appeal, right? But in the meantime, they have to abide by this ruling. And this judgment has been cast, and if he continues to essentially pursue exactly the same practices, that would be the worst advice I'm sure his lawyer would give him, because it essentially builds the case even further against him at the appellate level, right?
I think the importance of this ruling is also the level of detail that judge put into the writing of the ruling, because it shows specific cases where the laws have been violated. And also the 3 cases, as James Garcia, that are on top of the list, but are very well detailed and also supported by statistics. So I think it's a very detailed, that gives a lot of information of persons of situation that we community has been knowing for a long time, but also puts into the international arena all the details of the racial profiling, and that is systemic.
And I think beyond that, I mean, I think that none of us here are lawyers, so I think to sort of belabor the legal questions here might be less of a service to the listening audience. But there is a bigger issue here on the table, and that issue is this a sheriff? Is this an elected official who has abused his power and authority? And I think that that's clearly the message that the judge is giving here. And it's also part of a pattern of abuse of authority in many other arenas. Exactly. This is the same sheriff who showed up at Phil Gordon's office and confiscated telephone records. This is the same sheriff that went to the offices of the CPLC and confiscated financial records. None of this, of course, produced anything. This is the same sheriff who initiated investigations against supervisors, including Mary Rose Wilcox. On and on and on. This is the same sheriff, by the way, who arrested the editor and publisher of the New Times and took them into custody, right? And that lawsuit is out there, right? So this is a sheriff that abuses his authority as an elected official, and I think sometimes this term is sort of thrown around loosely. In this case, it's not. This is fascist behavior. This is behavior that is not becoming a democratic society. This is an abuse of authority in a way that is literally unconstitutional in America, and he's gotten away with it for too long. And this, I hope, is the first indicator of a pushback in a serious way.
James Garcia! Wow! is so eloquently put. But I'm sort of a conceptual artist. I wonder if this ruling of Friday will be enough that years hence we look back and we saw that things finally tipped the other way. I think we've been going so extreme for so many years. I wonder what part of a judge's ruling doesn't the right understand? This is a pattern of abuse that can go way, way back. We can take hours to talk about Joe Arpaio. But the fact is, he has been enjoined. Here's a list of what Murray Snow wrote, okay? He's enjoined from detaining, holding, or arresting Latino occupants of vehicles. Mm-hmm. He's enjoined from following or enforcing its Lear policy against any Latino occupant in a vehicle. He's enjoined from using race or Latino ancestry as a factor in determining to stop any vehicle. He's enjoined from using race or Latino ancestry as a factor in making law enforcement decisions with respect to whether any Latino occupant of a vehicle may be in the country without authorization. He is enjoined from detaining Latino occupants of vehicles stopped for traffic violations for a period longer than reasonably necessary to resolve the traffic violation in the absence of reasonable suspicion that any of them have committed or are committing a violation of federal or state criminal law. He is enjoined from detaining, holding, or arresting Latino occupants of a vehicle in Maricopa County for violations of the Arizona Human Smuggling Act, that's, I think, HB 1225, without a reasonable basis for believing that, under all the circumstances, the necessary elements of the crime are present. And finally, the seventh one is that he is enjoined from detaining, arresting, or holding persons based on a reasonable suspicion that they are conspiring with their employer to violate the Arizona Employment Sanctions Act. Geez, Joe, I think you've been kind of defanged here. Don't you think so? Joe? Malto meal? Joe? I'm sorry, all of you are just looking at me like with your mouth.
I was just trying to figure out whether you were done. Okay, let's continue the conversation just briefly with regards to the idea of that we've somehow turned our corner in terms of this kind of behavior, this kind of attitude. I think that corner started to be turned, of course, when the 1070 ruling came down. I think that corner started to be turned when Russell Pierce, of course, was recalled. It started to be turned in a number of different places. Essentially, what's happened, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years is that I think a majority of Arizonans are finally starting to say, this is stupid. We don't live this way. This is not us. This is not the way we, as a majority of Arizonans, think about brown people, about inclusiveness, about diversity. I think that unfortunately what happened was that the leadership of this state was hijacked about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And they ran the state senate, and they had taken over, of course, the sheriff's department. And they, for a time, were in charge of the Attorney General's office, or now still, of course, are in charge of the Attorney General's office. And so there was a kind of power grab that occurred. And I think a lot of people are saying, this is not us. This is not what we want to be. And that corner is starting to be turned. And this is one more step, one more indicator of that.
In the meantime, how many more people must suffer?
Yeah, a lot of people are still suffering, of course, absolutely. A lot because it's not done. The work is not. Tom Horn is still in office, for instance.
Yeah, there's still a lot of negative elements out there, but definitely, as James said, the state started to turn the corner some time ago. And we can see not only in the recent rulings, but also in how the society is behaving, and also the situation that are presenting. So we are seeing that the community has been learning a lot of things, how to fight back also these abuses. We as community are more organized and prepared, and it's not happening like before, like the politicians can do whatever they want. We're documenting cases, we're writing down what is happening. Before it was like, what can we do? But now we know what to do, we're more proactive, and also the results are showing up. Also, the ACLU national and local has been putting a lot of efforts to that, but the community also has been working on that.
Thank you, Carmen. We will return after this break on Phoenix Talkback. Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. I have here in the studio with me Terry Greene Sterling, Carmen Cornejo,
Yay!
and James Garcia. My co-host is Cesar Valdez.
Yay, Cesar.
Let me just say what a great panel we have. Incredible.
Why, thank you, Cesar.
Before I continue, let me just tell you, you can call 602-277-5369, or if you're outside the 602 area code, you can call 1-866-536-1100. Again, that's 602-277-5369, or 1-866-536-1100. We're talking a combination, immigration, Arpaio, and the DREAM Act. And to bring everybody up to speed regarding the Gang of Eights plan and immigration reform in the U.S. Congress at this time, listen to this.
The Senate immigration bill creates a pathway to citizenship for nearly 11 million people. Giving them legal status would add $1.5 trillion to our economy by increasing wages and generating more tax revenue. The bill will let dreamers, the children who've only ever known America as their home, apply for permanent residency after 5 years. Work visas would allow aspiring Americans to change jobs, bring their spouses and children, and access citizenship. But there are a few things about the bill that need to change. The border security goals are unreasonable. Unmanned drones at the border would cost taxpayers too much. The deportation of families wouldn't end right away, and LGBT families would be excluded altogether.
I really fear that immigration reform will get caught up on the border security requirement of 90%. In other words, I believe this will be a fight between comprehensive reform versus comprehensive enforcement. What do you guys think?
Oh, well, I guess let's kind of give the audience, I think, just an update on where we are, right? So last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee basically voted in favor of the immigration bill that was proposed by the Gang of Eight, so-called Gang of Eight senators. And that bill includes a path to citizenship, among other things, but it also includes a very tough security measure. Now we're on recess. Some of those senators are floating around the country, presumably having town halls and getting and hearing, getting an earful from people. But next month, early next month, the bill should go to the Senate for a full debate. With regards to whether it's going to get bogged down, I mean, I think politicians are magnificent at sort of pushing things off, and I think, as I understand the way the bill is structured now, and jump in, you guys, if you can, the way the bill is structured now, the bill could get passed with this so-called 90% security having been achieved at the border. Somewhere down the road, the ability for people who have been legalized to then apply for citizenship could get bogged down. That could get bogged down the road. It won't stop the bill from passing, per se, but it could prevent the advancement of people's ability to apply for citizenship 10 years down the road. 10 years in politics is an eternity, right? And so this is the kind of thing that could become part of the bill, could get resolved further down the line. And I think those of us who are obviously supporting immigrants' rights in this and are concerned about humane treatment for them do worry that further down the road, this could be a major impediment to people seeking citizenship.
Oh, yes. I understand that the bill has a lot of hurdles for the persons that will apply for permanent residency first and then citizenship. But we're really happy that the bill has a very generous provision so far for the DREAM Act that mirror very much the situation with the deferred action plus extra. Also, the bill is just huge. It has a lot of provisions, and also there have been amendments to it that benefits education, and I'm really pleasantly surprised about that. There's a provision about STEM education, and there, I guess this is attached because the H-1B visas, where the high-tech companies are seeking employers around the world that has certain qualifications in high-tech industry, are going to be coming, and the limits for applying for these visas is going to increase. So in order to compensate for that, there's also going to be more investment on STEM education, which is very encouraging.
And STEM is science and technology degrees.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I think the Republicans have traditionally sponsored immigration reform, and I think they're very anxious to get this passed after the fiasco that happened with the election. And the other key point is, we keep hearing that 11 million people will have a pathway to citizenship, and it's going to be quite they're going to have to go through pretty serious background checks. We're not going to have criminals here, and the pathway is rigorous and expensive for them, and they're not going to get benefits for a long time.
Did you hear the most recent amendment added to the bill, something about health insurance? Have you heard about that?
Well, as it stands right now, anyone who is legalized under this bill would not be eligible for Obamacare, in essence, right? You could not get health benefits. You would have to buy your own privately. You could purchase health care benefits, but you would not benefit. Because right now what happens, of course, is that under the Obama plan in general is if you can't afford to buy health care, then presumably you might be eligible for, say, in Arizona, Medicaid benefits, that sort of thing, right? You would not be eligible for any sort of public service, right? Any public benefits.
Right, and that kind of follows a tradition in our immigration law that we don't allow legal residents immediate access to benefits for quite a few years. Even though they are legal residents, that doesn't mean they're automatically able to access benefits except for the public school education of their children.
I think that there are a lot of good things in this bill, but there are some things that are of real concern. I mean, one of them is that they're making more restrictive the ability to bring other members of your family into the country. They're tightening that down a little bit, so it won't be. It's never been easy to bring other members of your family into the country, but now it's going to be even tougher. With regards to border security, one of the things that should be very disturbing to people is that here we have essentially hard right-wing Tea Party Republicans very often saying, well, we can't pass an immigration bill unless we spend $8 billion more on border security. I'm like, where the hell is that money going to come from? And why is it that these fiscally conservative people suddenly want to spend $8 billion more at the border? And then beyond the fiscal question, what worries me is that, and we know this from experience because we've seen it happen over the last 10 or 15 years, the tougher you make it at the border physically for people to get into the country, the further out and more remotely they try to cross into the country. They go into even more and more remote regions, which is why we still have upwards of 200 people every year dying in the southern Arizona desert because of ridiculous border security measures that have never solved the problem. They've never really addressed the problem.
And also the tougher enforcement of the border brings organized crime because before it was a pop and mom operations that brought immigrants here to the U.S. Now that you have organized crime with serious problems.
Yeah, it used to cost $200 or $300 to get a coyote to bring you across. Now it costs $3,000 to $5,000, which is insane. Right?
My own feeling is we should legalize drugs, put the cartels out of business, pass immigration reform, again, put the cartels out of business, and that, I think, should take care of the cartels. I mean, after all, America loves our drugs, don't we?
Well, but yeah, and that's probably a whole separate program. But definitely, the cartels, the syndicates, and Mexican crime elements have essentially said to themselves, you know what? We don't just have to move drugs across the border. Now the U.S. government has made it profitable to move humans across the border, and so we're gonna dive into that, and they're heavily engaged in it now.
Absolutely. I think when you hear this talk about 90% security at the border, it's baffling. And I think at the end of this week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, you get a sense is that it's very mixed. Very mixed. I mean, the S-744 was definitely benefited with a lot of amendments that were good, such as making an affordable installment plan, ensuring for more low-income immigrants to be able to pay the $2,000 required. There's, the 1 year path to citizenship for those who enlist in the military, and all of those are great contributions onto the bill. I think a lot of it is just common sense. I mean, one of the things that was added on there was that there's provisions that restrict ICE enforcement at schools and hospitals. And I mean, these are just things that are common sense, and it's just so good to see that they're adapting these amendments to the bill.
Well, definitely the immigration bill that is presented in Congress at this point in the Senate by the gang of eight, it's a mixed bag right now. I mean, it has very good things, but also has several things that can concern us a lot. However, I think this is the best opportunity that we have in so many years in having something that is going to try to fix the broken immigration system. I'm concerned, especially because the way some amendments has been written are going to affect Arizona in particular, because there's a provision saying that the undocumented immigrants, they need to demonstrate that they are gainfully employed to have access to the process of legalization. However, we have in place the employer sanctions law. Technically speaking, they cannot work here in Arizona, and it's presenting a problem. How are you going to demonstrate that you are
Yeah, is federal law going to supersede state law?
Exactly, and how is this going to happen and going to play back? And it's the same problem that we have, and in another level with the Dreamers. They cannot afford the $465 for the DACA fees because they cannot work. I mean, you are putting a lot of restrictions. I would like to see somebody talking about Arizona exceptions. Because we have in place some very damaging laws that are going to pose some questions in some of the amendments regarding employment and demonstrating that you are employed here.
Yeah, I think those are good questions for our senators, right? We have two of the Gang of Eight are U.S. senators from Arizona, Jeff Flake and John McCain. And they have been, in many ways, politically very courageous, at least recently, on this issue, and are pushing the boundaries and sticking to their guns and so on and so forth. I can't think of any other cliches to throw out, but I think it's important that we also start to ask them some of the hard questions, such as, well, where does Arizona state law fit into this scenario? And are certain, for instance, there is still a provision out there for 1070 that says that you can pull people over, local police can pull people over and ask them questions and inquire about their citizenship. That's still out there.
You're asking a really good question. I've had this debate with a variety of people lately about the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution. Specifically, I state the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I think it's titled either Title 7 or Title 8, which is a guard against discrimination. And then again, there's also the 14th Amendment, the equal protection, equal of rights, the rights of all, for everybody under the law. And I'm sorry, but I really think that the solution is going to be federal law, and all these states that are passing these SB 1070 type of laws, they'll have to change or die, or risk losing federal funds.
Or become obsolete and ineffective.
Well, they are obsolete and ineffective, but there's still a number of people in those states who are voting for those legislators, that legislation and that style. I mean, it's got to... I'm impatient. I'm not waiting for attrition of the death of all these regressive people who want to take us back to 1859. There's got to be...
Because their medical care is too good, they're living too long, is that what you're
That's
saying?
right. Yeah, there's a case where Obamacare is going to continue on with this scrimmage line between right and wrong, and I do believe that the right is wrong. Terry, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I was just going to say your comments about state legislatures criminalizing immigration in different ways, as we had done with SB 1070. I think that circling back to the Arpaio injunction, to me, that's a metaphor for how these laws will continuously be slapped down. This is a federal case, and it indicates constitutional violations, and it prohibited, it keeps Arpaio from turning a lot of people over to ICE, and from doing his own style of enforcing immigration law, which he wasn't supposed to do in the first place, but continued to do.
Yeah, and all of this discussion about a turnaround perhaps beginning to occur, pushback being successful, laws being overturned. Most of 1070, of course, is no longer in place because the federal Supreme Court ruled against it. These are all rooted in what you just suggested, that it's an equal protection question. Are people being treated differently because of their race or ethnicity or nationality? And that's why these folks are losing, because finally the cases are working their way through the courts.
James,
and thank God for the Constitution.
They're not losing fast enough. And I asked the question before the half-hour break. How many more people need suffer? How many more people need die?
No, I agree. They're not losing fast enough for us because we know that 1,000 people a day are still being deported from this country.
Right.
We know the human cost.
Let's talk about the human cost. We have dreamers here in the studio. Cesar Valdez, my co-host, and Carmen Cornejo, who's sort of like the godmother, advocate for
guardian.
all the dreamers.
She's a dreamer with papers.
A dreamer with papers.
Dreamer's guardian.
Thank you so much.
I like that.
So, folks, what do you... I'll tell you what. Before we get into that, let me play something for you. There was recently a CD produced for the Dreamers. Here's a couple of musical spots that I'd like you to hear. This is music from the Dreamers themselves. Of the Dreamers, for the Dreamers, by the Dreamers. Let's listen to a snippet of 2 sections from the Tequila Party CD.
Excuse me, just a moment of your time so I can explain, make it feel real life. Cause these kids never committed no crime. Nah, you know the dream won't die. Put it into perspective, this immigration situation and all these deportations. When will we start to heal as a nation?
We all want to be a part of something, and we all want to feel wanted. And we all got our doubts, but we know now that we can be a part of this dream.
Change the world. Can you? I can 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 change the world.
All right. You know, so in the face of all this suffering, we've got these kids who are singing. So what kind of suffering are we talking about?
Well, it's I think that you know, this whole thing is kind of this mixed bag, because on the one hand, the best immigration reform legislation that has existed in almost 30 years may soon get passed. So you should be excited about that. On the other hand, there are still a lot of people who are not going to be included in this. A lot of people who are going to be left behind. There are people who are coming into the country after December 31st of 2011 who won't qualify to apply. There are 1,000 people being deported. There are still people dying at the U.S.-Mexico border because they're trying to get in now, because they're looking for a job now. They're not waiting for the implementation of this bill. So that reality is still out there. We should keep that in mind.
Well, thanks to people like Carmen Cornejo, the godmother advocate for all the Dreamers. Now, come on, Carmen, take a little credit. Is that it is effective to let people know on Facebook, please call ICE and have people released, please.
Yes, has worked. But it's not only. I mean, it's not only what I done. It has been a long battle that started 10 years ago. And you said before that you were doubting if the DREAM Act will be included in the House bill. Believe me, it will.
I do.
Otherwise, you're going to have a rebellion.
Really?
No, and let's be honest. This immigration reform is passing because of several situations. I guess Congress is ready. Industry persons, big money is ready to push it. But the community is ready. But also because the Dreamers made a lot of the push early on in 2010. They wanted the DREAM Act as a standalone bill, but they exercised a remarkable amount of power and will to move.
I wrote a column. Go ahead.
I think it's just continuous advocacy work, being articulate, sharing our stories. A lot of this debate has been fueled by fear, and addressing the real. What the reality is, what the actual studies show, what the reports show, what the statistics show, and I mean it has been a long.
In other words, you've been fighting lies with facts.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wrote a column recently that talked about. It was a reaction to the governor's decision to. Or rather, the judge's decision to allow Brewer's ban against driver's licenses for Dreamers to stay in place, right? The governor issued essentially an executive order that said Dreamers could not receive driver's licenses in the state of Arizona, even if they had received deferred action from President Obama to be here in the country with some sort of legal authority, right? That you can stay in the country and find work. And, of course, so now you can find work, but you can't get in a car and drive to your job, which is absurd, of course. But the point of my column ultimately was that the thing that I've observed about Dreamers, particularly people like Cesar and folks who are active in this, is that they are the living embodiment of what we consider full democratic participation. They are using every means possible within the purview of the authority granted by the Constitution to press their case, right? And they should be admired and encouraged and supported for that, not oppressed or pushed down.
All right, that's exactly right. Yes.
So I think we touch, we touch on every aspect, whether it's civic engagement, whether it's, we made our efforts with Congress, it didn't work with Congress. We went to the president, we got our victory that way. So, I mean, it's a combination of civic engagement. It's a combination of, being aware and just continuously, advocating for this issue.
Also, the Dreamers have been very savvy in utilizing high-tech and technology to convey their messages. I think the advocacy has been basically organized online, and is one of the best examples of the use of social media and technology and the service of social justice.
Speaking of technology and the Dreamers, isn't it the Dreamers who won the robotics competition recently here in Phoenix?
The Cartagena
Here's an
robotics
expert
team,
on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an expert too. The Cartagena robotics team has been very in the forefront nationally on technology, and it's one of the schools that has a great percentage of Dreamers in their roster, and they have an amazing also performance of a number of persons that send to science, technology, engineering, and math careers.
And didn't they win recently?
They every year they win, and they go and represent Arizona in the nationals.
Yeah.
Every year.
I think what's also just important to emphasize, we're here at this crucial moment. We've been talking about Arpaio, we've been talking about immigration reform, and I think it shows in the support that we've accumulated. And we were talking about affordable healthcare a while ago. And this is just a support that has been turned out by the American people through our work. 63% of Americans believe that undocumented immigrants who achieve provisional status should have access to Medicaid. This includes over 40% of Republicans as well. So this is just a lot of the support that is coming out of that is emerging is out of through our work. 64% of Americans support a 5-year pathway to citizenship rather than the 13-year timeline. So it's all these huge numbers are coming out in support because of our advocacy work.
Yes.
Yeah, and let's not forget why we're here on this particular day. It just so happens this morning somebody sent me something on Facebook that says, like this if you agree. This is a quote from a Republican. If Republicans refuse to pass comprehensive immigration reform, we will become obsolete as a party within 10 years. Right? I liked it. No, and I liked it not because I'm particularly anti-Republican, but because it's true. Because if the Republican Party does not react to the growing clout of Latinos and people of color in general and people who sympathize with this perspective, they will lose.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, James. James, while we hear you, the show is coming to an end. Would you care to tell people, anybody out there listening, James Garcia, what you're doing, what's coming up and new in the world in James Garcia's world?
Well, I'll leave with two things. One, one of my clients as a communication specialist is Promise Arizona, and Promise is doing a lot of work right now on something called Remember November, which speaks to what I just said. It's reminding politicians that we're here today because of what happened last November, right? And then I'll leave with this in terms of my own personal work as a playwright. I have a work coming up in the summer in August, a play called Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About the Culture Wars We're Afraid to Ask. Look for it at the Herberger Theater Center.
Sure. Carmen, Terry?
Well, I think a lot of the listeners are going to hear a lot about the comprehensive immigration reform. But if you're a dreamer, apply for DACA. Don't wait for comprehensive immigration reform.
Good.
Don't wait. DACA is here and now.
Terry?
Okay, well, I continue giving, book talks and promoting my book and writing and reporting for the Daily Beast. And I would like to end my little piece here by suggesting that I think that dreamers who have DACA, who have legal authority to be in the United States, will eventually get their driver's license for constitutional reasons.
I think you're right.
And Cesar?
Well, I mean, it's the Senate recess, so we're going to be doing a lot of advocacy with them and going after and pretty much stalking all of our senators.
This has been Phoenix Talkback. Thank you very much, everybody.
Real talk.
Boogie.